Hab Gut is an economic game for 3 to 5 players based around commodity speculation. So it's a stocks and shares game, which makes it sound relatively boring unless you're particularly into those sort of games. But I can assure you it really isn't. It's a lot of fun. There's some really ingenious mechanics in this game which set it above other games in the genre, and it's also light enough that you can play it with non-gamers as an introductory game to sort of modern board games. It plays in a shortish time frame, 45 minutes for 3 to 5 people, which is a great time slot. The components are good. Unfortunately, it's only had a German release, and although the game is language independent, it's quite hard to come by. You do spot it from time to time in the UK. It'll crop up in maths trades, or I've seen copies at the UK Games Expo on stands, and you'll find it on online stores from time to time. But its availability is not widely distributed, so it can take a little bit of hunting down. But it is well worth the effort. This really is an exceptional game, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the gameplay and then tell you why I enjoy it so much. The first thing I'm going to do is just show you how the game sort of looks when set up and show you what all the different features and components are. So we have this long board with a grid which represents the prices of different commodities. And the commodities that we have are salt, tea, I think that's wood, coffee, grain, and coal. And then the prices all start at 40. And these represent the different stocks. The prices can go all the way up to 250, and they increase at intervals of 5, but as they go higher, they start to jump much higher, and towards the end they're increasing at intervals of 20. So it's quite good to get your stocks up into that high range where you're going to start making some real money. These are the stocks themselves, so you buy cards which you then put in front of yourself to say that you own some of those stocks. There's paper money. It's quite hard to replace this with poker chips because you do need to keep your money secret, so without player screens it's quite hard to actually do that. We then have these selection of cards here, which are the market manipulation cards. They show different stocks and different price increases or decreases accordingly. Now, the first really ingenious thing about this game is that as a player, I would be able to see these 2 racks of market manipulation cards, and those are available to me throughout the game. The player to my left, however, cannot see this one. He can only see this one and the one in the far corner over here. The next player around to the left of him will only see the 2 at the top here, and then the player to the left of him will see this one here and this one here. So everybody has some information, but nobody has all the information about what's likely to happen in the market, and that is a very clever mechanic, and it's the main sort of thrust of the game. So for example, the player over here is likely to be thinking, well, he's got a +4 on wheat or grain and a +6 on grain, so that's looking really good. So's coffee. Coffee's got a +6 and a +4, again looking really good. But wood, not so good, +2 and -6, and at some point those cards are going to have to be played. So he might invest heavily in grain, particularly knowing that there's also grain over here at +4. But over here, the wood isn't looking so good, -4 and -2. So what you might not know is that in these corners, over here and over here, there may be -6 on grain, or -2 on grain, or -4. So we have some information and we can make judgments about which things we want to invest in. What happens during the game is that initially you have a phase where you can buy and sell stocks. You can either buy or sell. You can't do a mixture of the two during that phase, and you can buy up to 3 things. So I might choose to buy 3 grain and a wood. So let's have a look over here. So we have 2 grain, and a wood. Let's go with that. That's my 3. So I buy those. I start off with 300 money, so I'd pay the cost, which would be 120 at the start of the game. I now have the choice of donating one, if I would like, of these stocks to charity. And this is another really important and really clever part of the game. So if I thought that the wheat is going to, or the grain is going to make a particularly good increases, then I'm going to choose to put that on my charity board. So that would slot in here. Now you don't have to donate anything to charity, but at the end of the game, when all these charity stocks are sold off, this happens twice during the game, at the end of the game, the player who has made the least money for charity will be eliminated before we count up everyone's total money. So even if you've got the most money at the end of the game, if you haven't donated enough to charity, you're going to be eliminated before the scoring even starts. And this is again a really clever way that the game works, because you've got to constantly try and work out what other players might have donated to charity and make sure that you're one step ahead of them. I think this is where the Hab Gut bit of the title comes in. I can't honestly say that I understand German puns, but on my English translation of the rules, which is a very good English translation from Board Game Geek, it says wealth is good, wealth and respect is better. So I think we have a pun here on the word gut, meaning good. So it's sort of having goods, being good, as well as haben gut being some sort of, I think it's a commodity sort of phrase, a stock market sort of phrase in Germany. So that charity thing is a really unique part of the game. Once I've chosen what I'm buying and what I'm giving to charity, then my opponents will do exactly the same thing, and then we come round to the market manipulation phase. Now at this point, I will have the chance to play one card from here and one card from here. One of them, though, I can only play at half value. So I might, for example, think, right, my opponent's bought a lot of coffee, so, I don't want the coffee to go up too much, so I'm going to play this one at half value. So that is going to be at +3. So coffee will go 1, 2, 3, and it's now worth 55 where it was worth 40. I'm going to play, on the other hand, the wheat at +4. So that's now at 60. Then the player to my left, who's sitting here, he can look at these two boards here and take one from each board and manipulate the market further. Then the player sat over here looks at these two boards and he does the same. And then the player who's sat here, he can look at these two and he does the same. So we end up with the market completely altered. So we may have something like this. At this point, everybody may have given something to charity, some people may not have, but we repeat this process over and over again until all of these cards have been used up. At that point, everybody sells off their charity goods and reveals to the other players how much they've given to charity. And this is the halfway point in the game, because now people have a whole nother round where we restock these here, where they can try and catch up and give more to charity to make up for the fact that they're a bit behind. But of course, if they overdo it and give too much to charity, their total amount of money at the end of the game is going to be lower. And at the end of the game, the player with the most money wins, as long as they're not the person who's given the least to charity. It's a really clever game. It's not difficult to explain. It's not difficult to pick up. And it's quite exciting. You know, it's quite a lot of fun in here. I'll tell you a little bit about what I think about the game. I'm a fan of European economic games, dry-looking games. You know, I seem to be able to find the fun in them, and I enjoy them very much. Hab Gut is a great example. It really helps for me if a game is a little bit obscure. It starts to feel like a bit of a treasure in my collection if I know that, I've struggled to come by it, and that it's not a game that everybody has on their shelf. So Hab Gut is a great example of this, and it really opened my eyes to a whole genre of stock manipulation, commodity speculation games, which I now really, really enjoy. But I think Hab Gut is still right at the top of my list of these games. What I find exciting about them is I like that idea that I can invest in something, and then I'm not great at calculating what the possible outcomes are going to be, but I do find there's a lot of excitement when that investment pays off, and I receive a lot. Or there's a lot of excitement as well in seeing the other players manipulating your stocks, and sometimes manipulating them to your advantage, but they don't know they're doing that. That's very satisfying. This game is also extremely satisfying when you see a player who thinks they're doing brilliantly, and then at the end of the game, they've completely fluffed it because they haven't given enough to charity. So if you're too greedy, you don't win this game, and I really like that. I think it's a great. I mean, I don't care about messages in board game, but it's a good message. It's a good sort of ethic for a stock manipulation game. Not that any of that really matters, but it also means it's a lot of fun at the end of the game when you can say to the other player, well, I'm sorry, you haven't won. You're too greedy. And the player who's been a little bit more cautious, they're the winner. I think it's a great game. It's well worth searching out. I just want to talk briefly about other games that it's inspired me to get, and other similar sort of titles. The most closely related is Mercurius, which I'll show you here. Now, Mercurius was an Essen 2012 release from a Polish designer. I think he's Polish. It's a game that is very similar to Hab Gut. In fact, it's based on Hab Gut. The design is based on Hab Gut and developing those ideas. It loses the two really clever mechanics from Hab Gut. We don't have that shared information in the same way, and we don't have the charity donations. That said, it does replace those mechanics with two other clever mechanics. I don't think they're quite as ingenious as in Hab Gut, but it is a good game. It's slightly more complex, probably not quite as accessible for non-gamers, and it runs a bit longer. The artwork on it is fantastic. The cards all feature artwork with similar sort of beautiful imagery to this. It's well worth a look. Whether you'd go for this over Hab Gut, I don't know. Whether it's worth owning both, I'm not sure. I own both because I particularly like this type of game, and I like to change up which one I'm playing. But it's a solid game. It's not particularly well known, and it's well worth a look. Perhaps a little bit more known, I'm not sure really, is this one, Black Friday, or Schwarzer Freitag on my version. Black Friday by Friedman Fries, who did Power Grid and a whole load of other games. This is, I think this is a brilliant game. This is hugely overlooked. It's become a sort of bargain bin game, and I think it's partly because people don't realise that the bull and the bear is a sign of the stock market. That's what this bull and bear is all about. But also because the rulebook in it is absolutely atrocious, probably the worst rulebook I've ever read. There's a lot more randomness in this game than there is in Hab Gut and Mercurius, but there's also probably a bit more excitement because here we have a looming sort of inevitable crashing market. It's going to plummet. And that really does make the game quite exciting. There's loads of tactile pieces in here. It's a really good design. It's completely underrated. And well worth looking at. This one, Die Gnome von Zavendor, the Gnomes of Zavendor. This is a clever engine building economic game with a central stock market in it. Really, it's got nice pieces, nice artwork by Clemens Franz. I love Clemens Franz artwork. We're trading in gems, but there's a central stock market in there. It's a good game. It's not a brilliant game, but it is solid. It's unusual to see that mix between engine building, like a classic Euro game, with the stock market sort of stuff. Again, a bargain bin game. Often you can get this really cheap, and it's much, much better than its price tag. So have a look at the Gnomes of Zavendor. And then you've got all the well, you've got all the 18xx games if you really want to go heavy. This is the only one that I can really bear just because of the length of it. This plays in a couple of hours. Poseidon, where something like 1830 is going to take you upwards of 6 or 7 hours when you start playing it. Poseidon is a great game. I really love in these games the fact that your opponents can be doing something and you can benefit from it if you've invested in their actions, sort of parasitically taking money from what they're doing well. And that features in Hab Gut as well. So if you like stock market games, they're all worth looking at. But back to Hab Gut. Yeah, great game for 3 to 5 players. Great game for non-gamers. It's the paper money and all that is familiar. People are going to look at it and think, oh, okay, a bit of sort of trading, buying stuff, a bit Monopoly-like. Of course, it is nothing like Monopoly. But if you want to get non-gamers into stuff and they've enjoyed that sort of thing in the past, they're going to recognise this as a board game that they can access. And actually, for gamers, that charity mechanic and the shared but limited information, those are really clever things that a gamer's going to go, yeah, actually, this is something unique. So I think it's a shame that Hab Gut hasn't had a wider distribution, but if you can get hold of a copy, then I'd say hunt it down.